Thank you.
Kinley, my granddaughter.
Oh.
Kinley. Yep.
Pretty cute there in the background.
Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do this. Okay. I think you're,
I think we're there, huh? All right. Well, wait, no, this is not working for me. Okay. It was going automatically. Yeah. All right, so forgive us for trying to figure out this technology bit. Y'all know me. I retired in 2015. I joined Find a Grave before I came here. And one of the things that Find a Grave is learning about stones and seeing old stones. And that's why I trained myself how to do proper cleaning. After lots and lots and lots of research, I figured out the proper way to clean. Doing all that research, it all comes up into the same spot as how to repair stones. So I read a lot of stuff about repairing stones. I wondered about it. I didn't really do anything with it. And then it turns out I joined the cemetery committee after I came into OGS. I came in here in 2016, then started with Betty's group the following year. And one of the things that caught my fire was we worked in the Pioneer Cemetery in West Bloomfield, and I opened up, found probably 10 stones over there. You know, so we dug them up, cleaned them up, GPS'd them, put them on Find a Grave, but then we buried them again. And it's like, So I got more interested in fixing them. So I was reading up more on it. Really didn't know what I would do with that knowledge, you know, because I knew I couldn't. Once I learned, I knew I couldn't do it when we were reading stones because it's a lengthy process. Then it turns out that Farmington needed some help. And Donna Hill Herendine contacted somebody here, Betty, and my name got brought up as somebody that had interest in that kind of thing. So I went and met with the commission, and that was in 2019. And as I explained to everybody then, I have the theory, but I have no practical experience. So we made a deal that she would supply all the materials, all the repair materials, and I would supply the labor. You know, so I would use it as a training. You know, I was on the job training type of thing, and we could get some work done. I had been to that cemetery several years before and was horrified by its condition. So when I was asked, I jumped at the chance. So that was in 2009. So we did all the, yes, 2019. So in December, you know, the December timeframe, November and December timeframe, I kicked around out there a little bit, looking at stuff, just a general surveying and identifying whatever stones, digging around the edges of some of them. There was one stone, Abraham's, that was sunk into the grave. So I got that out of the grave, you know, I don't have a problem digging even in a grave because I know there was a lot of dirt between that stone and the grave. So I didn't have a problem lifting it up and getting it out of there. And that's all I did that season was just to get it out of the hole. And I filled the hole up because I just had to get it out of there. So in February, I came here I went upstairs and looked at the old listings and started to get an idea about what kind of information was available. I found this interesting, an article from 1959, and then it talks about 8 stones were standing in 1959, the same year I was born. I thought that was pretty cool. Only 2 stones were standing when I started this though, and there was 2 pieces sticking out of the ground. So we were really down to 2 stones, but I thought it was neat that in 59, the year I was born, there was 8 stones. So then we looked at the listings.
Was that the Power Cemetery or the
Yes.
cemetery where the track got built?
No, the Power Cemetery. They actually talked about it, discussed it there, because they were saving that cemetery. The one where the track got built, the track got built. They didn't. So, but this was behind the track. So they were.
Well, they were supposed to move stones from what my understanding.
Yes, yeah, they took stones out of the Cooper Brown Cemetery, and moved them. But we have no information. Farmington has no information. They have that article, which talks about a couple of people. Doesn't talk about complete families, like they mentioned Abraham, the one whose stone was in the ground. They said he was one of them, but his whole family's there. So it's like they either moved them all, or it's just they're reading the stones that were there in the cemetery at the time. This is a listing from '66. It was upstairs. That was the DAR did, and so I was able to grab that information and then grab this other information. Everything that was upstairs, just to give me an idea of the names of the people and the families that were up there. So then March came. I finally got my act together and decided to take a couple pictures. I would have liked to should have done it when I started, but I wasn't ever thinking I would be at this point where I would be giving a presentation and doing a show and tell, so my pictures were for me to determine where the stones were before I started moving stones and all that kind of business. So we have lots of stones, and this is just an example of you can see here, this is all part of one stone, but I think this part might have been a part of her stone too. I'm not really sure, but this is what I was up against: stones leaning against trees, knocked up. This was like a rummage or a rubbish pile. Here's a slotted base. This is right at the edge of the cemetery. So there's a slotted base here, broken piece here, broken stuff here. There's an actual grave here. But so this is kind of thing we had. I found a survey marker. That's this thing in the center here. And then I went to the other side and tried to find a survey marker there, but I didn't have any luck.
Nate, what do you mean by survey?
A survey stake, one of the iron stakes in the ground with a little ribbon on it. So I wanted to find out where the edges were
Of the
cemetery. Yes. And then I poked around outside of it, to see, especially in March when a lot of stuff wasn't grown up. So I did it in December too. I was poking around out there seeing, because there's rocks. If you not familiar with Farmington, Farmington is a rock. It's a the whole thing is a rock. So and I found,
And clay.
yes, I found both of those in the cemetery, and I found that I have my T-handled rod that I do all my locating with. Not good in Farmington, because everywhere you hit is stone. So
Dave,
what I ended up doing was actually digging.
Dave, is there any
Yes.
way those of us on Zoom can see your photos?
You don't,
We can't see your photos.
ah,
Let's see.
share screen.
Don't do that.
No, no, no.
You are share screen.
Yep, you are now.
Can you see anything?
Yes, I think you just need to click on each individual photo that you want to share, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we got to restart the thing. So
I didn't mean to interrupt, but we'd like
It's
to
all
see.
right.
No, no, no.
no,
Yeah, we'd like to see. There you go.
Okay.
Now I can see your photos.
all right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
La la la. So, oh, I can do that. Here we'll go. We'll start back at the beginning here for you. Well, these are the listings. That was the article, and then the different listings that I found upstairs. So then these were the first pictures that I took, showing the basic devastation. And then that was March. Then we had a pause because COVID came, and even I was working alone in the cemetery for a while there. You weren't allowed out of your house, So in May, I went back and we started working in earnest. One of the first things I did was start tagging trees. I asked Donna, I said, I don't want to spend all this time repairing stones and then having these trees fall on them. And so she was very receptive to getting rid of the trees, particularly the ones right inside the graveyard. It was a locust grove. So locust is like a weed tree and it grows everywhere. They had experience with destruction from trees. They had some good damage in South Farmington. So they were all for getting rid of the trees. It was just a matter of the money and all that. So we marked out, I think she gave me 10 trees I could mark out the first time. So, so I did that. I marked them all out. And then I started working on figuring out who went where. So, uh-oh. Okay. So this is what I was still working with. Stones everywhere.
Dave, can they still see you?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Whew. All right. Abraham's the one I dug out. You can see the area, this top area was white because he was underground, but then right here was where he was sticking out of the ground. And you started getting a staining. So that was his wife. So these were all buried. So we took notes of where everything was. And we did lots of measuring. And you can see this is what we were looking at. Cora is here, but she actually, her grave was over here somewhere. This was Reuben, and he was way off. These guys were way off. They were totally out of the way of where they were. It didn't make sense where they were, other than they were just
Decide where they should be.
I spoke to them.
Were there any plots of the? plot names?
No, there was no maps whatsoever. And there was the listings, but they didn't go by row or anything. And most of them were in alphabetical order. That didn't help a lot. So like this guy, this one here, Abe, his grave is actually over here. This was his daughter and his wife, and they were almost where they were supposed to be. So what I did, because my T-handle wasn't working, I dug, like, let me see if I can find one. There's a piece sticking up here. And then if you look on the, if you see through that tree, there's another standing stone back there. Oh, actually it's leaning right there. This was before I straightened it. So I knew that was a headstone line. So I dug trenches, probably a foot to 16 inches down, the whole thing.
And I got pictures of it being. I had to go by it one day and I stopped and
Yeah.
it was a hot day.
Yeah, it's yep. So and what I would do, I'm sure I'll have pictures in here to show you. I took measurements of all the stones, and not just the measurements of where they were compared to the trees and stuff, which was funny because after the trees disappeared, those measurements didn't mean much. But all the breaks on all the bases that were in the ground still all matched stones. And so I knew the Power folks were here. The Ford folks were in this area. The Brooks people were over here. The Repelliers were over here. So I knew the general area where they were. And then it was a matter of matching the stone to the break, you know, so I could, all the stones are different. So every width was different. Every thickness was different. And of course, then every break is different. So that's how we matched them up. But I spent the whole first year doing that, the whole first summer doing that. So this stone, like this stone here, this one here, I just actually straightened it, just straightened it initially. When they went and removed this tree, then I dug it out and got it out of the way so they could stump grind. But I straightened that because there was two that were crooked. There was that one leaning forward and another one leaning sideways. Those are the only two that were standing, complete stones. Then there was a couple of stubs. So he was leaning pretty good, root bound, really bad. I did get them straightened up. Something that I didn't figure out right off the bat was this footstone had initials of somebody that didn't exist. Found them though. So, and then this is William. We still don't have him together, even though I'm done for now. We found bits and pieces of his stones. When we were digging other places, we'd find little pieces. When the town guys came through, like after 21, I had already finished most of 21. They came through and they cleaned all the trees out. And when they did that, we were able to, they actually found a bunch of his pieces. So I made a box out of pressure treated lumber, and I have his pieces all in it. Not enough to put them together. But I do have the knowledge now that I'm gonna revisit it after I have a little bit more training and experience, and see if we can't put one together and make them one. I straightened out the base and we got all the pieces and it looks nice and pretty now, but hoping to get it completely up at some point. But so this is his here. But then this is the slotted, or this is a stone for a daughter who doesn't belong there. This is her slotted base, which doesn't belong there. Slotted bases are different than the broken bases that are inside. For the slotted bases, I had to go by the stone concentrations in the ground. As I was digging trenches, I would find a nest of stones, and they came in two kinds of nests. There was the big nest, and then there was the two narrow nests. Two narrow nests were what a stone had been slid into, and they held it in place. Then the flat nest was what they set the slotted bases on. And there was only two slotted bases of that style. That's an above ground slotted base. So that would have the nesting. The other slotted bases were in the ground. And the only way I saw them was because they've been pushed up through the years by the trees, by the frost upheaval. And I'll show you some of those. And I, obviously dug a few up, but this is what I was looking at. So this is the end. Here's the orange stake that I put in the ground. That's the back of the cemetery. So they put a lot of stuff along the edges, out of the way of the lawnmowers when they did that. So we took lots of pictures so we would know where they were, where they'd been planted, and then I might be able to figure them out. I might not. I think Arlene took a picture of Anna here, Anna Tripp's stone. This is essentially where she was. This is actually her slotted base over here, and this is the stone that her base would have went on. But when we picked that up, we found all the data was on the back. All the information was on the back. And that was a family thing, and I'll show you a little bit more about it. Here's a broken slotted base. So they left the pieces together, which was great for me, because once I figured out who it belonged to, I was able to connect it together and put the stone back together in its own slotted base. We did a little rubbing to figure out GM Lafayette there. You can't even see, even clean now, you really can't see the words. And you can see on this one, epitaph is actually visible. But boy, you couldn't see it at all. So we did a lot of digging, a lot of uncovering. Found lots of things. Nasty
So that
broken.
was that deep.
Nasty. What's that?
That stone in the front was that deep.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. There was probably this little corner sticking out of the ground, and I opened it up. The foundations, the big foundations, they didn't move those. They might have shifted a little bit from the tree branches and stuff like that. And this one, obviously, well, not obviously, but it was shifted a little bit. This stone actually goes on it, and the decorative base, which I found later on. This stone was a bear because it was so thick, very heavy. May 22nd. I found Geronimus. This is his mother, and I showed you a picture of her earlier. She was a Rapelier. I was digging around to loosen up her stone, to get it up, and I hit this base, which was underground. You couldn't see this base until I was digging on this side, I think, on the bottom side, and I hit it. And I went, oh. So then I uncovered it. And I thought, that's 6 feet away from her husband. So that can't be her base. Kennett, took the measurements. It's thin. The ladies generally had thicker stones. I don't know why that is, but generally they have thicker stones. But anyhow, once I determined that that wasn't her base, but it was in the row right next to her husband, give or take, I said, I actually was going to move her stone over here. I'm pointing to the screen. I was going to move her stone over here and then dig around there to see what I could find, see if I could find the base, her base. But before I did that, I had to clear this. So I started poking, and don't you know, I poked here and I poked here, and that was good enough for me. So I started to dig it, and we dug it out. It was 8 inches long, or eight inches at this, in this corner, 8 inches down. Poof. You know, it was a little, it was only like 4 up at the top. It was perfectly preserved stone. So perfectly legible. So we knew who it was, Geronimus, who we had already found his footstone and didn't know where it belonged. That was it. So that's him cleaned a little bit. So we were still, at this point, still working on identifying these. Trees were just a nest of stone. This is the one I called the bird tree, and it has all these stones around it. So we figured out, you know, we labeled everything, took pictures of everything. And there you can see when I started digging, I found base. There's a base. It was underground. There's actually another base right here under the ground. So then I was able to match those to the stones that fortunately were right there by them, which made those ones easy. And that was the Ford family. So that was good that I got those, because then I knew, okay, that's the Fords. That's the Fords. So there's this footstone that I had already found, but back corner again. Ellis's stone was in pretty good shape. Allison's was pretty worn. We found the footstones, figured out who they belonged to. There's another slotted base. This is up here at the top of this picture is the William, a little stub that was sticking out of the ground. It was slanted. This is his daughter and her slotted base that belonged way over here. But there you can't see it too well, but there's a slotted base because I started digging this trench to go towards William, because William's in the line. And so I found a slotted base right away. So then we take a picture so we know where the heck it is. This is the other slotted, this is the other base that was still sticking out of the ground. And that's a bad angle, but there's a stone there and then a stone here, and these ones match. So we're measuring, wanting to find out where everything is, digging, finding stuff underground all the time. Still taking lots of pictures. Cordelia. So that is her slotted base.
Dave,
Yes.
is any of the power Stanley in living at Brown Farmington at all? Or any,
Not that I know of. I know that there's one in Pittsford area, and she sent the article they did in the newspaper to me, to one of their relatives down in Florida, but as far as I know, that's the only ones.
just wondering.
Yeah, the Power family. There's Powers people around, but they got the S on their name, so. So anyhow, these guys were way off from where they were supposed to be. These stanchions, there was an area that had these stanchions, and that was like a convenient tree too. So they just leaned stones against them when they picked them up off the ground. So so we found a lot of them leaning there. That they didn't belong there. They didn't belong even near it, but it was a convenient place to lean them to keep them out of the way of the lawnmowers. So, but we did lots and lots of measuring, and this is here. We now have the two sisters who were also the wives of the same guy. After one died, the other married him. He's not there. So we took lots of measurements, lots of measurements. This is Susan. One of the interesting things doing this is that I wanted to know how people were connected. And so Susan was in the Repellier area, but she was a power. She was a power by marriage. She had married Abe Jr., but her family, she was a Repellier. So, that's why she's here next to her dad. Doing some clear stuff. Another interesting person was Eliza Mason. Got no idea who she was until the ladies read a letter from one of the powers wrote to a relative talking about Eliza, their inmate that lived with them, and how heartbroken they were about her death and all that. So it's like, okay, so she lived with William and Dorcas, and she was their inmate, but she was family to them. Never determined where she was supposed to be buried. So we put her in the children's line. There was a children's section, and their family, their children. She's with their children, William P. and Dorcas's children, and we made notes that that's where we put the stone. I didn't want to leave it. Well, there weren't any trees to lean it against by the time we were done, but I didn't want to leave it there, just laying on the ground. Didn't want to throw it in the scrap heap. And I had a hell of a time coming to the realization that I had to put it somewhere. So we put it where we best thought it would go. She was only 20, 21, 22 when she died. And we knew what family she was with. So we put her there with notations in their records that that's not necessarily her spot. And we ended up in 2022, when we were finishing up, that's when we did that. And we also did a couple other ones that we didn't know for sure where they were. Most everything was a slam dunk, but not everything. This was a stone that this little war top was the part sticking out, and the folks that have been wandering around cemeteries, you see those little white bumps in the ground every now and then. So I dug it out, and you can't really read it. Zimrota was her name, but it was all the way in the ground, facing the wrong way. And that's another little sign. But anyhow, I already had her stone and slotted base next to her dad, William. I told you they moved. This was her footstone. They used it as her footstone. Had all their information on it, very decorative, but it was facing the east, and in a footstone location, not a headstone location. So we knew where to put her headstone, which should be facing west. All of these stones in the cemetery, which is common in cemeteries during that time, they all face west. the headstones face west. Then the person is buried behind the headstone facing east. So their head is by the headstone, but they're looking at the sun when it comes up. And then their footstone is at the, end of their grave. And that is usually always facing east too. So that helped me. First, I was really confused because it's like, I got one of them. But it all came together eventually. So let's see, this is William Stone. This is her slotted base. I was measuring, so I knew where it was, but turns out I don't think you can. Oh yeah, that right here is her footstone. So she actually got buried over here when it came time. Took a lot of pictures of him. I was really proud. Took a picture, a close up of the epitaph just for you. So, slotted base, decorative slotted base. That's one of the ones that's going to go on a regular block. So that's going to be exposed and nice and pretty. That was, I think, the one for the big one. That's what I did. Measure. That's the base. That's the base. It didn't go far. The tree's right there. I cut the roots off of it. I had to cut lots of roots to get to it. It had been pushed down by the roots. Most everything gets pushed up. That one got pushed down. And then this one here is another one in that same area. And once I got it out from under this root, you could actually see the pins. The pins are still there. So the pins didn't break that one at all. Yep. So there's the decorative base that I found for the big stone. So then this is the one that we just saw. And then there's the block that we saw. But we had the block, but we didn't have the decorative base that goes with that. There's that decorative base flipped over so you can see the holes that matched up with the pins. There's a famous picture right there. Whenever we did trees, what I had to do, what I felt I needed to do was I moved all the stones away from where they were going to take trees out. So no matter how much they weighed, I had a hand truck and I moved them. And granted, this is the first year before I learned. So I moved them. I moved them all to the edge so they could come in and tear up the trees and not damage any of the stones. Then I bring them back. Well, we went through 3 cuttings, so I had to move them a couple of times. And I still have that hand truck. It's a nice hand truck, but
How did you get them on that?
that was tricky. These things, everything's marble. Everything was marble. Marble is 175 pounds a cubic foot. They weighed a little bit. I used a 2x4 method, the 2x4 method. And so I would get it up a little bit, put it up a little bit, get it up a little bit, maybe put in a couple of 2x4s to keep it. So if I had to rest for a minute, and then once you get it up to a certain spot, then you can get it up.
Wow.
So, but I muscled it. Just that first year though. Then I learned, and then I built a tripod so that I didn't have to lift the heavy stones anymore, because I tore myself up that first year, especially moving them twice.
Right.
Well, 4 times, because I had to move them out of the way, put them back, move them out of the way, put them back. So we learned, but I did everything very patiently. Stones, when you lift a stone, the first thing you're worried about is the suction, especially with clay. So you have to dig the whole thing free and then slowly break it free so that you can get relieved of that suction. So we did it very slowly, and I always use wood so they would never damage any of the stone. And just use, 2x4 and a 2x4, get it up, and then once I got them up, I kept them on 2x4 so that I didn't have as much trouble, and they couldn't sink into the ground. So that's what I did. So for 2000, this is 2020. That I was just determining where everything went, and I laid things back on the ground once I found them. That's one that's got to be fixed. That's Dorcas. She was one of my biggest challenges. 5 pieces. See the piece in the ground. That's the piece that was there and matched up conveniently with the big piece that we didn't know where it belonged because it didn't have anything on it, but it was broken in a couple of different places that just matched exactly what I was looking for. So that's how we did it. And so at the end of 2020, this is how I left this stone. It's laid out. We know where she's going, and we did that everywhere. So that's Susan. I couldn't find John's, the child that died shortly after she did. That she gave birth to him, and then she died in childbirth, and he lasted a month or so later. Turns out he was on the stone. That's why I couldn't find it. So then I'm digging in the line. I found her. I know she goes there, and she goes there, and her mama was over on this side by her dad, because these are Susan. That's Susan's granddaughter. But anyhow, so I was digging my trench, and I came across these pieces buried in the ground. They didn't start out buried; they were just heavy pieces of concrete that got laid over by the stanchion. And this one is the slotted base. That was a slotted base for Reuben, who was a couple rows away. This is the decorative base for her. So, and like I said, it's measurements and everything. I never had to guess. It was always measure. Only thing that matches is this. Only thing that matches is this. So it was easy I couldn't figure this one out for the longest time, but once I looked at my sheet and said, I could match up the measurements, and that's how it worked. So, but they were down a ways. So that was 2020. So I wrapped it up. I made my first little map, but I had everybody laid out. I had everything identified, most everything. Like I said, there was 3 or 4 that I never got firmly done. So 2021 came along. January, I was back out there marking trees for another dig, and then we started the repair process. So this is what I came back, and this is what it looked like when I started. And it looks like a war zone, but now it's an organized war zone. So there you can see there's that slotted base. It's placed together. It hasn't been repaired yet. So then we started. We started with the base that was on the floor, that was already sticking out of the ground, because it was flat. It was plumb. It was straight as an arrow, both on the sides and on the front. So I said, great. Clamped it into place and did the repair. Simple repair. I guess I'll talk about that now. The repair materials I use, I have a list. I'll show you in a little bit. There's a special kind of epoxy called HPOX 5010. It's a clear epoxy. I would do spots just to hold it together. And then I would use a marble composite patching material, or later on a limestone patching material to fill in the cracks. So that in essence, the end fills, the stone material that I was laying in was what was really doing the work, and keeping water out. You know, the epoxy was just there to give it a little stability. But epoxy is stronger than marble. So a lot of the old repairs that you see where they epoxied or liquid nailed or something when they tried to fix a stone, that stuff is stronger than the stone. So that's why it all fails. That's why it usually fails, because it just pulls a stone apart. The epoxy doesn't fail. And that's why you use masonry material, stone material, to repair stone, so that it absorbs in there and it holds, and it's the same, the same durability.
How did you get that stone up on top of that base? How did you line that up?
Actually, I had my tripod.
You used your tripod for that?
Yes, yeah. This is year 2.
Okay.
So I've learned.
Is there a picture of the tripod?
Yes, I do. I made one. They have commercial ones, and they're like $1,200 for a nice aluminum ones. I want to get one, but I'm not going to spend that kind of money. I made one for $500 out of steel, jack post for house, and I'll show you. But that's a lot easier on the body. I was still using braces on everything, but I used a tripod every chance I got.
Getting it lined up like that.
Well, that's what the clamps were for, so I get it close, and then before the epoxy sets, clamp it down, and you can see on this one that this big wide thing, that's a clamp that's going across the sides. So that's clamping it this way. And then these little ones are clamping it the other way, so that everything is square. Then I let the epoxy sit for a couple of days, and then I would bring in and do the end fill. And then the end fill you leave for a week, maybe, to let it cure more. So, and as it turns out, that one was really tall. When I got everything else done, that one was too tall. That base was plumb, but it had been pushed out of the ground. So in 2022, one of the last things I did was take it out of the ground, dig a proper foundation for it, and reset it so that at the proper height. Yes, it's lower in the ground, and you'll see in the final things that the crack is almost at the ground level, because her sister was right next to her, and we had to fix that too. So that's me probably fixing her. Another thing that I learned when I started dealing with other professionals was that you don't go to the frost line like they do nowadays. A modern cemetery law says that modern stones, you go down to the frost line with a foundation, but that's essentially because the stones nowadays are granite, and they're much heavier and they need better durability. But guys that restore historic cemeteries don't do that. They don't go down to the frost line. They just go down and make it steady. I went down all the way, and did I say anything about stones in Farmington? I used my tripod many times. I had to set my tripod up to lift the stones out of the hole I dug.
Wow.
Because they were full of stones, and that's why everything fell over. I mean, I don't know any vandals went through, or deer running into them went through, or branches breaking them. I don't know, but all the stones were heaving, because of the frost, and they're pushing stuff up and out of the way, and the ground does a natural creep anyhow, and so these babies ain't going anywhere, because they're down. It's the best historic cemetery build that there is. And I continued, even after I learned, I continued that cemetery that way. I'm now working in the Hathaway Cemetery and not doing that. We know how to do a proper foundation without digging down to the frost line. But I did for this whole cemetery. So there's the standing, and at the infill's in, so it's you can see it a little bit, but a lot of the dirt, it's probably white now. I got pictures later, but when they're on the ground, or they're in the ground, the mineral and stuff is on them, and the acid rains on them, and then the leaves blow on them, and they soak in all these minerals, and they're a bear to get out. I was spoiled, because I was used to cleaning stones that were, sticking out of the ground, and always had, and they clean right up. These ones that have the minerals in them and have been driven over for years, they take a little longer. But I remember a thing that one of my mentors told me, was it took 150 years for that stone to look like that. So if it takes you 3 or 4 years, you're still better than Mother Nature. So I was like, okay, I can go with that. Abathar, Abe, I call him, was the patriarch of the family, came from Connecticut. Had a big stone, nowhere near where he was supposed to be buried. This is his base, and we found it. Turns out that's the top of his base. There's about 16 inches in the ground still. But what they did with old Abe, because he was the big guy, they filled all around his base with stones, and then they poured concrete on it. So naturally, where the concrete ended is where it broke. Naturally. But I needed that 16 inches. So I had to dig it all out and chip it all away, and so that I could attach it to the base. You got all the time you do this, you got to have all of the stone, because you don't want the epitaph to be underground. You need a certain amount in the ground. So with him, we dug it out, we chipped it all away, we got it attached. We then cast a slotted base, a below grade slotted base. So that's buried down at the frost line. There's gravel, then there's a pad that I poured, and then there's a slotted base that I built, and that's all still underground. And then we put the stone in it, in the slotted base, put historic limestone around it to seal it into the base, let it set for long enough period of time before we infill it. So we end up with a nice secure thing. And, if the limestone fails, the limestone fails. But the next guy will be able to take the stone and fix it, because it won't snap.
Is there a ratio that you want below the surface?
It's supposed to be 1/3 below, 2/3 above, is generally speaking the general rule, if it's a buried tablet. So, and there's tablets. Most of the small tablets don't have slotted bases, unless they're the decorative kind that go on the top of the ground. But a lot of these, the big ones, had the slotted bases that were in the ground. And you can tell if it's an in-ground or display, because of the depth. The depth of the depth for the one I made, this lot would be, the depth is probably 6 inches, 6 or 9 inches is the depth of the slot. That's the standard now. And I did that just because I did it. But the ones that were in the ground, they're only 2 inches. They were just enough to put the stone in, essentially, and they acted as its foundation, you know, essentially. Unless they did something like this, and then we got them together, and it was time to lift them into place. So I got these are jack stands. There's 3 pieces there. You can see these little hinge pins go in. Then it was I had a special order that chain to hang the chain fall on, because they don't make loops that big at Lowe's. You know, you can't get a chain that's got those big loops at Lowe's or Tractor Supply or anything like that. And then this chain around the edges is to keep it from splaying out, so that the weight doesn't pull it down and pop them out. So we were able to carefully maneuver into place. So,
Did
and
you
there's-
typically make the repairs while they were laying flat on the ground or after they were setting up?
generally speaking, I did these on the ground. Generally speaking, it really depended on, like for Dorcas, it's a big stone. I put the base in, and then I built up from there because it was 5 pieces, and I actually put pins in that one too, because it was just so massive, and it needed a little extra help. This one didn't have any pins. I just glued them, but you can see there's a big chunk of concrete on the bottom of it, because I didn't get it all, but I got enough to get it free. And so
So you laid it out on the ground on some 2x4s, pinned or glued it together, left the 2x4s there for strength. And
yes, yeah. Yep. So this is Reuben. This is the slotted base that I found buried with that decorative base. His was the kind of base that was meant to be exposed. So it's exposed. And then that's the limestone mix. You always use limestone because it's softer than the marble, but it's strong, so it holds it in place. But if a tree branch came and if it hit that stone, it would pop out of the limestone instead of breaking the stone off. You know, that's why they don't sink it in the concrete, because otherwise you end up with the piece stuck in the concrete. And you see a lot of that around because that's what they always did. So there's Geronimus. He cleaned up real nice. And Sarah, his sister, her base was upside down. And then I thought it was a foundation. It looked like a foundation block. And she was leaning against a tree. She was actually the heaviest. That's a 4-inch thick stone, 800-pound stone. But once I got that foundation loose and got it out of the way so I could dig it, it was like, oh, there's a slot underneath it. So then, and then measured the slot, and then, don't you know, we found her stone. We found where she went real quick. So there's Abe before he got his end fill. The corner got smashed a little bit. Actually, when I had it laid out, the Farmington guys ran it over, broke it a couple times, but we fixed it, made it look all pretty. There's Dorcas. She was 5 pieces, and there's a piece in the ground. The first repair is in the ground. You can't even see. But each one of these, I can't remember exactly, but like, like this connection and probably this connection. I put pins in and I used 3/8 pins, you know, thin pins. Pins are made out of fiberglass now. There's two types of pins, the fiberglass or carbon fiber. I use the fiberglass ones. They don't use steel anymore. And it was always a bad idea because of the thermal expansion. So you know, whenever you can see every stone that has pins in it because they all break, because the stone and the metal contract at different rates, and then you end up with a gap, and then you end up with ice, and then you end up with rust, and you know, so if you see green, then it's a copper pin or a brass pin, and if it's, you know, if it's rust colored, it's a steel pin, but they do damage, a lot of damage to the stones. So they learn different. Some pins were, if they were done in lead, if they were seated in lead, they didn't damage because the lead had enough flex, but they couldn't do the lead on the top and the bottom. They could only do it on the soft spots, you know. So your pin would go in the soft lead, and it'd be nice anchor, not going anywhere. Then they put the top on, but they couldn't put melted lead up in there and then set it on. So that's where they crack. You know, so it's but the lead looks great. There's actually a stone that I'm working on in Hathaway now. I don't know why, but they did lead pins. Makes no sense to me because, you know, it shows exactly what happens when lead pin gets, you know, a stone getting ready to tip. It's not going to stop the stone.
Did you drill holes in these two together?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, and it's a challenge lining them up. So what happens is that you make sloppy holes, and then you fill them. You fill them with epoxy, actually, to put the pin in, and then once you got it set into place, you know, then you know, they're full of epoxy, so it's not going anywhere. But you got to have the slop because you know, unless you're a machinist and you have this fancy equipment out in the field, you know, I mean, it's tough lining them up. So, you know, I measured 40 times to drill once, you know, so and then still have to slop it a little bit to get it to everything to line up perfectly, because you want it to line up as close as you can. And you'll see the biggest one I did still slipped a little bit. Couldn't help it. There's just do the best you can. So Rhoda, she used the matriarch of the family. Her stone was on the ground, totally rotted. I went to pick it up, and the bottom pretty much almost fell off. I found her base in the ground in mint condition, as they always are. I dug it out. I took the whole thing home with me to work on it, and I tried my best to keep it together, but I couldn't. So I cut off the soft part that was rotted away, so I had a good edge, and then I had the base. So then I was able to connect the base to the good part of the stone. But then there's still not enough to get me in the ground without her being this down here, where hubby was up here. So it's like that wouldn't look right. So I made this, they call these a sleeve base. And that base is about 16 inches maybe. The slot is like 16 inches. So the whole base of her stone is in that slot in limestone. So it's not going anywhere. And she's up a little bit. Still not up here, but she's over here. So it's not as bad. And the lawnmowers can hit that all day long. You know, it's not going to damage her stone. And I have in 2022, I limestone washed it. So it's all white. The whole stone is white now.
Was she made out of a different, was her stone made out of a different material?
That was cast concrete.
Oh.
Hers is, you know, a limestone that was real soft and our, it was marble, but it was real soft and I put it in the concrete slot, but then I filled the slot with limestone.
Okay.
So-
And her stone was originally marble? Well,
It is her stone, her,
the concrete
yes,
part was marble.
yes, yeah, if it's in the ground. Some like Geronimus look like brand new,
Right.
but others crumble. It just crumbles, and that could be in the same mine. It can be just further down in the same vein, where you know it's you know it's not a perfect blend. So some is a little better than other, and some is not. So that was old and in the ground, laying there, getting run over, and soaking up whatever it could, and it. I mean, you could tell, you know, even the tree is wore away, you know, because it's just it got beat up bad, and I think the rotted part actually might have been an epitaph at one time because there was like lines, but there was nothing. You know, it was nothing you would decipher as a word, you know, and most of that stuff was like, you know, I'm very proud that I was able to even do this, you know.
Yeah.
So I just wish if I had the knowledge that I have now, or the knowledge that I'll get in December, I could have probably saved it. Not sure that I could. And there's this guy in Connecticut that says I'm crazy to not even try that kind of thing, but he uses glue on brownstone. So one thing you'll find out is that there's big differences. What's that?
Say you use glue?
Epoxy on brownstones. There are, just like with cleaning, there's really a general consensus about cleaning. They're really only the argument on cleaning is the wet and forget versus D2. You know, that's about the only real argument. But with repairs, there's the epoxy people that use a lot of epoxy. There are the people like me that use a little epoxy and infill, and there are people that just use masonry product. The problem with that, other than I'm not certified in it yet, is it takes a lot longer to cure. You know, it takes like a month to cure once you've got it in place. I'd still have to keep the braces and brackets on it. And actually, the people that do that generally take the things to a workshop and do it there, because you don't want to leave all your braces out in the cemetery. I mean, you cover it with garbage bags and stuff like that, but it just takes longer to cure, and the purists say that's the way to go. But then there's the purists that have this product in Pennsylvania, Lithomax, which is what I've used a little bit of. So I've got some experience, and I'm going to school in December. And then there's the guys in Connecticut who can't even buy their product unless you get certified. And they say that everybody else is crazy. You only use this. But then there's that guy that does brownstone work with epoxy and repairs it and does an amazing job. But then there's the purists, and I have another friend that I've actually worked with who got that certification in Connecticut, and he's doing brownstones, and it's amazing the work that he does, like putting those together and then carving the parts that are missing. You know, because this material, you can absolutely match it because it comes in every color, and you can blend it to whatever color you want. So you can absolutely match it and actually match it, do the engraving. So I'd like to do his kind of work, but he's into it for profit, and I'm not willing to spend $650 for a hobby. That's how much it costs $650, and then you have to do it every 5 years to be certified to buy that stuff. If I was going to do a business, I'd do a business, but if it was a business, it'd be a job, and I'm retired. As soon as it becomes a job, it's no fun. So Abraham, he was the one that was buried in the ground. You can see on the bottom here some of the minerals that from the ground. Eliza, his wife. These are the last ones, the Hodgsons. And I still haven't found how they're related to any of the Powers. So I'm thinking those folks definitely came from Cooper Brown. Just my guess. But there's no connection to the Power family that we've found yet. We know who they are. So there we were. And there's pretty much what it looked like in 2020. Now, if I can figure out how to do this. That. Oh, yes. Okay. Now let's see if we can get a little trickier. Yeah, well, you know, we're not going to be able to do that, are we? So you have to stay with me on this a little bit. These are pictures of what it looks like now. But I can't. So it's white. There's one of the boxes. That's the box for Abram.
You think that spot is about where,
What's that?
so you put the box with the pieces?
I put Abram, we found pieces of them over the years. Just to the east side of the last row, where there is room for another row. But we could find no indication of any burials in that section. I was sure there was one there, but we haven't found. I did a lot of digging and I couldn't find any bases, but we did find lots of his pieces, enough that we knew who he was, and we knew who his mother was, Susan Repellier Power. So I put the box next to her. So he's next to her for now. And if there's something on after that, that'd be cool. You know? But you know, so he's temporarily there. This is not working for me. Oh,
There it is. Amazing.
yeah. So it went from a locust grove to bingo. You see the stanchions. So here's Abram here. And there's William. He's over here between his wives. There's Dorcas and there's Alice and their son, Alice's son, Alanson. And then these are the kids. And there's Mrs. Tripp, who is also one of their daughters. So she's a Repellier too. So Alice Tripp. And her kids, that's a broken slotted base. And then her footstone, I just put on top of it. Their footstone, was over in here where their footstone normally would be. And there was a lady that took a picture, but there's only a thumbnail online. And if you blow it up, it comes out as a different picture. I couldn't find the stone that goes there. So we put the footstone there to keep it out of the way of the mowers and to let everybody know that's where they go. And they were her kids, Alice, and this is the rest of her family. So this is Susan here. And then Susan's kids are her granddaughter and two of her daughters here. And that obviously is her son. And now that I think about it, I probably should have put him over here because there's a spot, there's two sisters here. But there was nothing in between them. Well, actually, it was part of that one between them. So, but that's how it turned. That's how it turned out. So,
Very nice.
yeah. So, yeah.
And that took you 2 summers, right? Or
It
3?
took me, 2 summers. This year I had 5 stones to put up. So I got those done probably in May. So,
Okay.
so by the end of June, I was done there.
So 2.5 summers then.
Yes. Yep. Yep. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Did you have anybody helping you at all?
I had ladies from the Historic Commission doing research, and they also did a lot of raking and stuff like that. But yeah, as far as the stonework, I did that all. So and enjoyed every minute of it. Talked to lots of people. Lots of people popped by to visit. So we would have lots of talks. So it was a good time. I was trying to find one of the.
What a gift to the community you've given me.
Thank you.
That is absolutely
Yep.
magnificent. Thank you for your.
Yes,
It looks like a cemetery now.
yes, it does. And now we're working in Lord Cemetery and in the what else?
You said you're doing some.
Oh,
Hathaway.
Hathaway. Yeah, Hathaway. Yep. So we're working in Hathaway. We're working in Lord Cemetery, and we're doing whatever Gorham wants us to do. The thing I like about Gorham is that the president of the Historical Society, Ken, is working with me. So I'm teaching them how to do the stones, so that, which would be cool if he could, take over himself. Because the more people, I'm not in this for business. It's just a pleasure to do. And it's just been working out really well for me. So, but I'm loving teaching them.
Dave, you said that there was a stone that you found. There was a person that we did not find when we did the original walk, probably 6 years ago. Was that Geronimo?
Yes. Yeah.
I thought that I would have remembered a name like that.
Yeah. Yep. Geronimus.
Did you add his information upstairs?
No, I did not.
But if you email it to me, I would.
There you go. I can email you a picture with his epitaph on it too. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's yep.
How many cemeteries in the county are there that would be like this?
Tons
Any
of
idea?
them.
Ton of them?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
There probably was at least.
should
one,
send
if
them-
not 5 in
I should
each
send them
county or
to
each
you.
county.
yeah.
Well,
Yep.
I would say there's the first help that I did with Betty's committee, and I'm not so much helpful anymore, but we were doing Manchester. There's one out at 21.
When I out left, we get Sunnyside.
Yeah, but that's
The one on
better
the
shape.
front one across from the sawmill, that one?
Yes, the one out beyond
Yeah,
Ilkamora.
yep.
That one is similar to what this one. There are a couple of them out near Lover's Lane that are in pretty bad shape.
There's one of them that you can only read one stone. There's only 4,
Yeah,
Yeah,
but and you can only read one.
then we went around the corner one time too.
Yes,
Bunch of,
Hill Cemetery.
the one up by the railroad.
well, that's
There's lots of
Pioneer.
bad ones. Actually, probably one of the ones that impressed Dave the most that we did was Dunn Cemetery.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that was, yep, yeah,
It impressed him not because it looked like Powers does today, but because it looked like Powers used to look.
yeah, yeah, quite the wreck, quite the wreck.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
another one there on 96 that's similar to that.
I have to say that Dave has been a marvelous addition to the system.
Oh, are you talking about the?
I
pink
used to
cemetery?
dig a lot. I have not dug anything in 3 years.
Just, town of Gorham has 12 active, so.
Okay.
And probably the other towns are sort of similar.
I know Canandaigua doing a lot of work. They have a cemetery committee that they're doing a lot of work on cemeteries. One of the things that they have committed to is to have town employee do the mowing on the ones that are abandoned and not hire somebody with a big mower that knocks over headstones.
Amen.
Yeah,
Yeah, Bleak was calling me because of these 0 lawnmowers.
yeah.
The 0 turns.
They would get stones and damage them.
You know, some of the old tractor types did too.
Yeah. I'm on the board for Brookside Cemetery over between Shortsville and Manchester. And they have it mowed 4 times a year. And the guy does it for like $800 a time.
It's a big cemetery.
Yeah.
it's built
A lot of
very
hills.
hilly.
So,
Yeah.
so you know, he's not really making any money mowing that cemetery for $800. On the other hand, they can't afford any more than that. So, and I don't think that's unusual for association cemeteries. I think Chapman's in that same boat. That's the one out on 488.
I know the one over in Cooking Springs right in town that we did. I mean, that was one of the Victorian cemeteries where the ground was as flat as this table, and they decided that it would look better if it was all hills. And
With
they-
stone walls.
Yeah,
And so you had, they built it in layers, and they added
I
stone
can't imagine mowing that.
walls, and they mow it every week.
Yeah.
They mow it with a push mower.
There's no other way they could do it.
Well, that's right, because
Yeah. Because it's
I mean,
stairs to
you
get up
literally
into it.
had to, there were places where we had to walk around because either that or you had to jump 3-4 feet down and then try to crawl back up.
Right.
It was challenging, to say
Yeah.
the least.
I think that was the most difficult physically to get around.
That was the hard, yeah, we ate all the bees.
Round days.
Yeah. We finished that one up at, I think, 5 o'clock in the morning when they used to sleep.
well, I could talk for another hour, but I think that'll have to do it for now.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Yep.
That was awesome.
Great job over there.
That's been fun. It looks nothing like it used to.
No, it doesn't.
It was interesting to drive by and see the changes on it too. I mean, I wasn't there regularly, but
Yeah.
huge changes from time to time.
I took pictures of it when Bruce Stewart was still alive, and at that time, it was before Betty. He sent you out to cemeteries by yourself. to take pictures and do the writings and I don't know what I did with it. I gave him copies of the pictures. Nobody knows what he did with them. So, of all the cemeteries, I took Olive, Payne, Cooley.
Got me, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Somebody would do that.
Yeah.
You get excited about it, because when you get the pieces. if
Yeah.
you're Hearing you, the system talk about a little bit here, a little there, then put it all together.
Oh, it's right back. I will. Don't worry, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
If I see that.
Good night, everybody.